Legion, it's Hadrian. Thank you for being here and welcome back to Strategy School in Civilization 6 Rise and Fall. Don't forget to check out the series overview if you're just watching for the first time. What we're going to talk about with this episode, I believe I mentioned at the end of the last one that I want to move in the general direction of establishing a religion and starting to talk more about what's going to happen when we finish the astrology technology. And that's definitely what we are going to do this episode. We're going to play until we get astrology, which might be 8 turns, or it might be less than 8 turns if we're lucky enough to find a natural wonder and get this boost instantly. It might just be more like, I'm guessing 4 turns. But in the meantime, the topics that I want to cover this episode are combat, because I think it's very likely we're going to come to blows with a barbarian scout at least, maybe even a barbarian warrior. So we're going to talk about the basics of how that works. And then also I want to discuss government types, and specifically policy types and policies, and some of the first decisions that you can make once we finish our first ever government type, which is the chiefdom. That will be in 5 turns when Code of Laws finishes. We'll have a more dedicated episode later on that's talking about the more advanced government types, but I just want to introduce you to the concept of this is a government type, these are policy cards, and here's how the decisions work in Civilization 6, as opposed to, say, how they worked in Civilization 5, and so on. So again, we're going to play all the way until this is unlocked, and we're going to cover those 2 topics along the way, and actually get some turns in this episode. Let's go ahead and check on, I think we're done. We finished with our warrior and with our scout. Yep. Let's go to turn 6. And what's that? Okay, he ran off that way. All right, we have a scout up this direction. We've already been moving north of Uruk, and it looks like there's kind of a coastline and some desert hills. Let's move towards the river. Oh, hello! We've got another goody hut, so let's actually step right up to the river's edge here, because I want to be able to jump across the river onto the goody hut in the next turn. Again, we're only going to be able to move 1 tile across because of the movement restrictions that occur when you're moving across rivers with units. So I want to be as close to that goody hut as I can muster in 1 turn. Same thing here. I want to move my warrior to this river's edge, and that's because I just want to have him close to Uruk for reasons we discussed. We don't want to have that warrior too far away. We've been using him to scout, but he doesn't have the same mobility as the scout, so I don't want to let him get too much farther, especially since that scout seems like they're heading down that direction instead of coming towards Uruk. We're 3 turns away from finishing our monument, which is not going to get a chance really to help with Code of Laws, because Code of Laws is 4 turns away. So by the time we have 2 extra culture points, which we're about to get, it's not going to make much difference. Let's see. Ha! Another free builder. Man, the game's being really generous with the free builders. All right, so we have 1 builder that's grayed out because we just got them and we can't move them this turn. But this is the builder that we've had for a while, and I think what I want to do, because you can't have 2 units of the same type on the same tile, I'm going to move you here. Do a little bit of sneaky scouting with the builder. Yeah, we just did that. You can do that. You just, obviously, you're not going to use a builder as a scout in most situations, because even barbarian units, you don't even have to have enemy civilization around. Barbarian units can run right over your civilian units like this that have this particular icon and just capture them. Straight up capture them. So notice that we did gain a little bit more era score. Villagers bring gifts as they join our civilization. Era score I haven't touched on as a topic yet, I know, and it is something that is important throughout the game. It was introduced with Rise and Fall. But the thing is, it's not as important as the other core mechanics that we're trying to go through first, so we will talk about that soon, but just I'm waiting to get to era score until we're done with the base mechanics of Civilization 6, FYI. So we just got another point of era score. It shows here 2 out of 12, and we'll talk more about what that means at the appropriate moment. Now, I have a couple of options here. We can move to this grassland tile to cross the river, or, oh yeah, the hills tile, because I want more visibility. There we go. Uncovered a little bit more terrain by virtue of standing on a hilltop. Even though there are woods, we saw through the trees. Okay, I am going to skip that builder's turn. I'm using spacebar to do that, by the way. And that reminds me, I've had some discussions with some of you in the comments and also on some forums about what I was talking about in episode 1 and those key bindings that you can set, particularly for next action being N. And some people have said, hey, I set space to that. And I feel like maybe it was space. Was it space in Civilization 5? Is that where I'm remembering that from? It's been a long time since I played 5, to tell you the truth. But here's the thing. You can do that. And I mean, the reason they give us key binding options is so that you can do what you want to do. So I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but just be aware. Space in Civilization 6 is the default for what I just did, for skipping the turn of a unit that you don't want to do anything with. So it's kind of handy to have space and N. So I use N for the next turn and space for skipping a turn. You can have it the other way around if you want. I just use N because next turn or next action or whatever, which usually it'll say next turn down here, but That's just a little heads up for those of you that were talking about using spacebar. Be mindful that you are giving up another key binding when you do that. An important key binding, I think. All right, we're going to move this scout down here to the hilltop. Yep, there we go. So we've uncovered a barbarian scout in this direction, which I was honestly expecting. So I'm going to skip his movement because I want to keep him right there and keep an eye on that scout. We'll see what he does. And then you, I'm going to keep moving you towards, this is not going to uncover anything else in this direction because the hills and the woods are blocking our visibility. Can't see past them. We're about to finish our next citizen as well as our next monument. And now we have an interesting choice. The game is recommending that I build a settler, and I'm inclined to agree with it. Obviously, we're not going to build a builder. The game has given us 2. There's no reason to sink production into those. You can build a second scout in early Civilization 6, and a lot of people do this, but if you're playing on higher difficulty, especially if you want to play on higher difficulty, you want to be very careful about sinking production into 2 separate scouts. If you lose one scout, yeah, maybe you're going to build another one, but we haven't lost a scout, have we? So it's just something to be mindful of because I'm not going to do it, and it's not generally advisable, especially if you're trying to get as much production and growth, and if you're trying to get ahead of the curve as quickly as you can early on. Or, of course, we could build armies, which are an alternative to building settlers. And when we encounter our first civilization, I'll talk more about kind of the important choices that you face in that moment where you realize where your first neighbor is and why there's a decision that you have to make between something like settler and warrior or slinger or war cart. But for now, we're going to go with just the game's recommendation and also just my gut instinct, which is let's get a settler going. Now, mind you, in 5 turns, what that means is that our population is going to drop down to 2. And just as a quick, somewhat more complicated reminder of the way the dynamics work, you might be already doing the math in your head going, okay, but yeah, in 3 more turns, it'll go back up to 3. No, because what will happen when we drop down to 2 population is that one of these tiles that's being worked by these 3 civilians will not be worked anymore. It'll be this one. So we're going to lose 2 food per turn, and it's likely going to take more than just the difference between these numbers, 3 turns, for the city to grow back up to 3 population. But like I was saying when I talked about settlers initially, you have to have at least 1 extra pop. You need 2 or more population in a city to train a settler, because when the settler trains, at the end of its training cycle, it's going to take away 1 pop. We're going to drop back down to 2. So just be aware that that's coming up. Let's see. With you, I'm going to be a little... I don't know anything about what's going on down here, but let me go ahead and step into those. Oh, hello!
As it turns out, Mount Kilimanjaro is not Wi-Fi enabled.
Unexpected.
So I had to spend 2 weeks in Tanzania talking to the people on my trip.
Oh, Sean B. All right. So that actually worked out. We've just finished our astrology project, which means that in 1 turn, I'm going to talk about code of laws for a bit and some of the decisions you make when you are founding your government for the first time and setting up your policies. But then we will transition to the end of the episode and we'll talk about districts and what they mean in the next episode and kind of some of the decisions we have to make, because we actually are about to make a technology decision that's probably going to be based in part on our ambitions toward another district.
I don't believe
What
in
am I
astrology.
talking about? Well,
I'm a Sagittarius and we're skeptical.
Sorry, I love that quote. I didn't want to interrupt it. So let's go into the tech tree and think about our next decision. What I want to emphasize, I've already covered this in an introductory sense in an earlier episode, but one thing I want to emphasize is that, yes, you have to be thinking about what is the next thing you want to research, but you also want to be thinking about what's the next thing you want to research after that, and then after that. When you think about playing chess, you're not just thinking about the next move you're going to make, you're thinking about the next 5 moves or the next 10 moves. A really good player has even more than that kind of planned out in their head based on what their opponent might do. And you need to think about the tech tree in kind of a similar way. So yes, pottery, as I discussed earlier in the series, is kind of food-centric. It gives you the granary, and you get the ability to harvest wheat and rice. Animal husbandry is kind of middle of the road, and you get the pasture and the camp, and that gives you production, that gives you food. Or you can go with mining, which is more of a pure production in gold type of thing. And you can go for any of those, especially if you were, say, going to want to build the pyramids as soon as possible, and you want to get to that wonder sooner. Yeah, you would go for mining before you went for any of these other choices. But I would really like to be able to get to all of my technologies sooner rather than later, which means I need science in the campus district as soon as possible. So I'm going to pick pottery. If I really wanted to go all in, I could do this. And I could just say, I want writing. And it'll go through pottery, take 5 turns, and then go straight into researching writing without giving me a choice. I still wanted to bring the choice up but we want to move towards that, in that direction. I would like in 5 turns to be able to reassess my situation, and I could, like I've pointed out already, we could always change things on the fly. We don't have to wait 5 turns if we wanted to research something else, but I would like to have a moment to think in terms of what my choice might be if I need to do something different, but chances are we're going to be going for writing in 5 turns. So always be thinking not only of the next thing you want to research, but what you want to research after that. Generally a good idea. Let's go ahead and skip the builder's turn. I'm also going to clear these notifications. We were, I think, what was that saying? Nice! We're the first from a major civilization to set eyes on Mount Kilimanjaro. So 3 era score. So that's actually somewhat telling, isn't it? If we're the first from a major civilization to set eyes on Mount Kilimanjaro, I now know that maybe there aren't any other civilizations in maybe this area here. And I can feel a little bit more confident about maybe taking the warrior down in this direction. Because, I mean, look at the yields around Mount Kilimanjaro. Look at them. If there's a river or another source of natural water around here, then this is going to be a prime choice for my, maybe not my second city, because I really want those horses, but it's going to be some prime real estate. Natural wonders almost always are prime real estate for cities, and you'll see more of why when we get to that point. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about combat, because I knew this was going to happen. We've got this barbarian scout up here, and he has decided to cross the river. He was here, now he's here. So notice that there are 2 tiles highlighted with this odd little spiky red exclamation point here. This is showing zone of control. Now, zone of control only applies to certain units in the game, and you have to unlock it, but the barbarians have it obviously from the beginning. And when you touch a tile, when you land on a tile with zone of control, that has a zone of control exerted onto it from another unit, you will lose all of the rest of your movement points, and the only option you have at that point is to attack the unit that's exerting the control. So the second I step this scout onto one of these tiles, no matter how much extra movement I have, I won't be able to move again except to attack this scout. So I can either move here, or I can move here. And speaking of chess games, you know, this is kind of a digital board game, and you do have to think about what is the better tile to fight from. First of all, you should know that desert plains, or this, I'm sorry, this isn't desert plains, flood plains. These are flood plains, and they are going to provide a combat disadvantage for any unit that is attacked on them. Any combat will take place on the tile of the unit that is being attacked. So, right now, this scout has a combat disadvantage. Woods give the units inside a combat advantage. So which tile do you think I want to move to? The one that's going to give me a disadvantage, or me an advantage if I'm attacked, and give him a disadvantage if I attack. We're going to move to the woods. And now I have the option of attacking, and notice it's saying when I point to the unit, I get a combat preview, and it's saying there is a -2 modifier to their attack strength as a result. So I'm going to go ahead and attack. That's just a prediction of how it's going to go down. So our scout's on the right, they're on the left, and it doesn't always play out exactly that way. So we'll have to see how the life bars end up. But it'll be pretty close. So they just come to blows. And yeah, so we got 4 experience, did 30 damage, and I'm guessing that this scout is going to turn tail and run because for the reasons I just explained, there's no reason for him to counterattack me there. Plus, a barbarian scout usually does that. They usually turn around and just run for the hills. Seems to be what they're good at. So let's go to the next turn, and now we have one more thing to discuss
It is not wisdom
before we end the
but
episode.
authority that makes a law.
And it's a pretty important thing. So we just unlocked our first 2 military policies and our first 2 economic policies. Every time we finish a civics research project, every time you will see this button pop up. It doesn't pop up for science technologies. It doesn't pop up for this. It just shows up for civics technologies. So if we click change policies, we have a free opportunity, our first ever opportunity, to install some policies, to enact some policies, because we are now a chiefdom-style government. We have researched Hammurabi's code, the code of laws, and we gain 1 influence point per turn. That hasn't changed. And now we can pick from one of 2 military policies and one of 2 economic policies. So you might already be figuring this out, but policies are ways for you to customize your bonuses in Civilization. And they're different in Civilization 6 than they were in 5 because you can, as I've just pointed out, you can change them anytime you want, and you can tailor them to your situation in each game. And as a rule, you should always do that. Try always to tailor your policy decisions to the game you're playing right now. The reason I say that is that it might be tempting sometimes to always go for certain policies and never others. And it's okay to prefer policies. It's okay to have things that you do a lot, that you do most often, but you can't have a strategy if you're not flexible. So just mind that. Every game is different because every map is different, right? So policies are going to allow you to stay competitive in aspects of gameplay where your starting location might have given you a bit of bad luck and left something to be desired. They will let you catch up. You can use certain policies to make up for those deficits. On the other hand, if you've had a strong start, policies can help you get ahead. You can take advantage of a strong start by bolstering your strengths to maintain your lead. So policies are implemented using these policy cards, which fit into a set number of policy slots. Now, right now we have just a military slot and an economic slot. As we progress through history, we will unlock more slots, and we will unlock more cards. Of course, as you already know, you unlock more cards by just going through the civics research tree. Unlocking more slots generally happens when you're transitioning to a more advanced form of government, which we'll talk about when we get to that point in the series. Certain civilizations and wonders, by the way, also grant additional policy slots. So you might have an additional slot for the entire game, for instance, if you play as Greece. And if you build certain wonders later on, you'll have extra slots of any of the 4 kinds. There's a wonder that grants an extra slot in all 4 categories. And yes, it is possible to have all 4 of those wonders built, which is always lots of fun because you have lots of room for additional policies. Policies can also be, as I mentioned, replaced for free, and that happens anytime that you have a civics project completed and you've just finished your research there and you have the option to change them as we're changing them now. So you can swap them out anytime you're ready to pick new civics research and just click the button that we click to get to this screen. You can also just get to the screen by going to the government interface right here. But you can also, we're not going to be able to see the button right now, but there's a button that'll show up when that's not happening, when you're still in the middle of a civics project, that will allow you to unlock your policies for a certain amount of gold. And it's more expensive the later you are in the game, but it is an option that you have if you want to go that way. So just as a quick side note as well, if you haven't purchased Rise and Fall, you should be aware that some policies are going to look a little bit different for you than they look in this tutorial, especially once these are going to be the same. But I'm definitely going to get to some later on that might look a little different for you if you're just playing vanilla Civilization 6, because some policies work differently in the vanilla game than they do in Rise and Fall. Just worth being aware of. So one more thing that I'll point out, I'm not going to talk again about the more advanced government types yet, but each government type does allow for different combinations of policy cards. I just want to introduce you to the concept by pointing that out. Chiefdom's very simple, it just gives me 1 and 1 and nothing extra. We don't have diplomatic policy cards or slots, or wildcard policies or slots. Wildcards we can put any color in, or the special wildcard policies which also exist in the civics tree. So we just have these choices to make, but later on we will unlock governments that will have a different combination of slots depending on what your priorities are. Again, it's all about making meaningful choices and being able to change those choices dynamically on the fly. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to go for discipline here. You've probably been looking at this while I've been talking. We have a choice of military policies, and I think even though we're not feeling particularly under threat from barbarians, we are going to go for discipline. +5 unit combat strength when fighting barbarians. That's our military policy. And then we have God King and urban planning. Now this is a very interesting choice because we actually, you can't really see right now because it's really, really grayed out, but we have no faith per turn. None. And we need faith per turn if we would like a religion. Or a pantheon, at least. We need a pantheon before we have a religion, so if we want a religion, we need a pantheon. If we need a pantheon, then we need 16 faith. And we don't have any faith income at all right now. So we need to change that. I'm probably going to go for God King for that reason. We have a pretty good gold income. We've been getting 5 gold per turn, but there's nothing special about that. That'll help us bolster our gold income a little bit. We can also go for urban planning if we wanted to, and that would provide +1 production in all cities. And that's something that I do fairly frequently when I'm not as worried about this when playing at, honestly, a different level than Prince. I used to go for God King all the time. I typically don't as much anymore, but for the purpose of making sure we get a Pantheon as soon as possible and that we kind of demonstrate the usefulness of using God King for that reason, I do want to use God King for my first policy. Let's confirm. And now notice that we have +1 faith and +6 gold per turn. These numbers won't always update in real time in response to changes. You know, they usually sometimes will take a whole turn to fully update. But on that note, because we covered, some good introductory topics with this episode, I want to stop this one here. And in the next one, we're going to talk about the district that we just unlocked. In particular, I am going to train this settler and get them moving to the settlement location that I decide on. And then we're going to talk about the Holy Site District because we're probably going to start building it and what that means and what they mean to Civilization 6 as a topic because they are a central part of the way this installment in the series was designed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to follow along. New episodes are coming out every other day at 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Comments are always welcome. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.